Motion passes 6-0.
Great, thank you so much. The next item is item 3A, Acknowledgement of School Board Recognition Month. Dr. Harder?
The month of January marks the annual observance of School Board Recognition Month. We extend special thanks to our dedicated members, Ms. Jamie Reaver, Ms. Lillian Lingenfelter, Mrs. Leslie Seeley, Mr. Grant Riles, Mr. Art Gutierrez, Mr. Jeremy Dorsey, and Dr. Jennifer Thomas. We thank them for volunteering their time and fulfilling the civic responsibility to make local control of public schools possible in our community. Governor Laura Kelly also established a proclamation to recognize January 2024 as Board Appreciation Month. So I'm going to read that as well. To the people of Kansas, greetings. Whereas the mission of public schools is to meet the diverse educational needs of all children and prepare them for future success, and whereas the Kansas Constitution entrusts locally elected school boards with the maintenance, development, and operations of Kansas public school system, and whereas local school board members are accountable to their communities for accomplishing the mission of public education in Kansas, and whereas Kansas Public School Board members advocate for our communities, our children, and public schools, and whereas the members of Kansas Public School Boards of Education are committed to providing an excellent education for every child in each community, and whereas locally election school board members devote countless hours to the governance of our public education system and the success of Kansas children. Now, therefore, I, Laura Kelly, Governor of the State of Kansas, do hereby proclaim January 2024 as School Board Recognition Month in the state of Kansas, and I urge all citizens to join in this observation. Thank you for all that you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. The next item on the agenda is item 3B, Public Comments. Casey, do we have any public comments this evening?
We do not.
Great, thank you. As a reminder, anyone wishing to provide public comments should complete the Request to Submit Comments form, which is available on our website. The form should be completed by 1 p.m. on Wednesdays, the day of the board meeting. The next item is item 4A, Executive Session, Consults with an Attorney.
I motion to go into executive session for 15 minutes for the exception for matters which would be deemed privilege in the attorney-client relationship under the Kansas Open Meetings Act, and that we return to open session in this room at 6:48 p.m. Superintendent Dr. Allison Harder, Human Resources Director Jared Giffen, and Attorney Tammy Samoji are invited to join the board for this session. Action is anticipated, and let's make that 6:49 since a minute passed.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Madam President, I move to return to regular session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Is it not working? Motion passes 6-0.
Madam President, I move that the Board of Education adopt Resolution 20. I'm sorry.
So we're moving on to item 4C, Resolution 2024-5 for final action.
Apologies for moving too quickly. I move that the Board of Education adopt Resolution 2024-5 to determine appropriate sanctions.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Would you rather do a hand vote? It's really slow on board docs. All right, all in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Item 4D, executive session for confidential student information.
I move that we enter executive session for 10 minutes to discuss confidential student information pursuant to the exception relating to actions adversely or favorably affecting a student under the Kansas Open Meetings Act, and that we return to regular session in this room at 7:02 p.m. Superintendent Dr. Allison Harder and Assistant Superintendent Pam Stranathan are invited to join the board for this session. Action is anticipated.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, we are now back, and I'll take a motion to return to regular session.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
I move that the Board of Education adopt Resolution 2024-3 to uphold the extended term suspension as recommended by the hearing officer and affirmed by the appellate hearing officer.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Item 5, consent agenda items. The items listed on the consent agenda are considered by the Board of Education to be routine business items. Approval of the items may be made by a single motion, second, and majority vote with no separate discussion of any item listed. Should a member of the board desire to discuss any item, at his or her request, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. What are the wishes of the board?
I move to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Item 7A, building data discussion overview. Dr. Harder?
During the November board meeting, you all heard about the district level data discussions. Now we're going to talk about what happens in the building. We have Mrs. Judy Stanley, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching, Learning, and Student Services, Mr. Dathan Fisher, Emporia High Principal, Mr. John Martin, Emporia Middle School Principal, and also his birthday, Mrs. Morgan Pearson, Instructional Coach, Mrs. Brandy Mitchell, Village Elementary Principal, and Ms. Joy McGee, Jones Early Childhood Development Center Principal.
I thought they were all going to leave me up here by myself. So on November 8th, the Teaching, Learning, and Student Services team provided you with an overview of how the district data discussion looks and how it works. Tonight, we have building representatives to share with you how it will at the building. You'll notice there are some similarities and some differences based upon their levels. And I'm going to turn it over to them.
Good evening. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what data looks like at the preschool building. So our data discussions primarily focus on our formative tests, which are the tests created by our teachers and staff, centering on those skills that the Kansas Early Learning Standards has set for us to cover with our 3- and 4-year-old preschools. Some of those are standards and skills that are covered by our new ELA and math curriculums. So we use the tests provided by those two resources as well. It ranges from counting with one-to-one correspondence, recognizing shapes, recognizing letters and numbers, to can they say their full name? Can they follow directions? Some of those things we've talked about before as social emotional standards and standards for success, where we're talking about, are they playing with peers? Are they taking turns? That is very appropriate data for us to discuss at the preschool level, that some of those things are important for them to be successful at before they can attend in a whole group or a small group. We have quarterly building level talks. So at the end of every quarter, the next staff meeting or PLT day, we set aside anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours where we as a building look at our data, and we look at an overall big picture view of our data, where we started the year, what growth has happened in the last quarter, and we start looking at what those individual skills might be needed to focus on for the next quarter, and then my teams always set goals for the next quarter. Those are in support of the building goals that we set at the beginning of the year. So every quarter we're going back to those building goals and making a quarterly goal that helps us get to that building goal, we hope, by the end of the year. Part of those data discussions as a team, as a building, are in teams, the 3-year-old team and the 4-year-old team. That also includes our strategist, and those teams have conversations together. So 3-year-old teachers might be talking to 4-year-old teachers about what they're doing in the classroom and what that looks like, especially for maybe some 4-year-old students who are a little behind. So they get some ideas from those 3-year-old teachers on things they could do to work on those skills and those standards. We have our PLC time weekly. We have time once a month for teams to discuss their data as a team, and our strategist attends those once a month with that team. So outside of quarterly, every month our teams are having those data discussions. They're looking very specifically at maybe one skill that they have decided to track for a few weeks and checking in with each other about that, talking about what successes have you had in the classroom? What did you use? Oh, you've had more success than I have. What did you do in your classroom? Asking each other for support. Sometimes that does even involve, well, I have 3 kids who are struggling with this. Can they come to you for a lesson? Not a lot of that happens with us, but it does happen, especially as we move into the spring. That happens a little more frequently. In October is after the first quarter. That's what we use as our baseline data for preschool students. We don't expect them at 3 years old to come in knowing a bunch of academic skills, or even social emotional skills. So our first quarter is what we consider our baseline data. So every year we look at that, and that's how we set our building goals that we're checking in with, and then from year to year we're comparing where were we at the end of the first quarter this year as compared to last year. All right, any other questions? Okay.
All right, good evening. All right, for Village Elementary and, probably most elementary schools, I would say we focus our data discussions about every 6 weeks. And so a lot of things you're going to hear are very similar to what Joy mentioned at the preschool level as well. But we typically try to rotate our math and literacy conversations so that we make sure that we touch on everything. Our social emotional learning conversations kind of come up more at our student intervention team meetings, our SIT meetings. And so those are not part of our rotation, but our Wednesday PLC times are typically where those take place. Grade level teachers, strategists, and the instructional coach and myself are collaborating to analyze our student needs. So typically we expect for teachers to work together during that Wednesday PLC time. And then when we come together every 6 weeks for that data talk, then we have the spreadsheet in front of us where we can kind of look at those different student needs and determine how we're going to group students. A collaborative approach is taken. So again, just really looking at student needs. We share students. We definitely, over the years, have really worked to make sure that everyone is our students. It's not my kids, it's our kids. And so that's kind of a mindset that we work to have and continue to have. Our data discussions focus on information from the formative classroom assessments as well as FastBridge. So typically on our spreadsheets, you will always see our, for example, right now our fall FastBridge assessments are on there, and then now our new winter. So we can kind of look at and see that growth. We look at percentile and then the actual numbers, as well as we have included the formative assessments as well. So basically it just allows us to look at some different variety of assessments and be able to group students in different ways. Let's see. Spreadsheets, as I said, are used to organize information and data. Staff work to group students based on their need and put them into our tier 1, 2, and 3 groups. And so we have a lot of conversations with our strategists as well, as far as if it's a student that requires a little bit more support, then obviously they're going to fall based on our data into those tier 3 groups. And then tier 2 and our tier 1 are going to be receiving more of that grade level instruction. Just depends on their needs. Let's see, grade level PLCs, again, are continuously having those conversations, and if there is any need to move within that 6 weeks time, it's not set in stone. It's very flexible, and so again, they don't have to come to me and say, hey, can I move these students, or go to other grade level teachers. It's just very fluid and based on student needs. Data discussions also occur in the form of SIT meetings, and so we have those really just however are needed, typically 4 to 6 weeks, depending on if we're talking about social emotional learning or academics. We do follow-up SIT meetings as well. As far as our school improvement goals, one of the things that we typically do also is set goals. And so, for example, we're getting ready to have our literacy data talks. And so our last round was math. So when we have our literacy data talk, we will just have a conversation about here's where our students are, where would we like them to be, where should we be at this point in the school year as far as looking at our learning guides. And then when we revisit literacy again later, we will check in and see, where did we have students that mastered that, what students need additional support, and how can we get them there. We end the year with celebrations and data talks. Teachers and staff strategists work extremely hard throughout the year to provide that instruction for students and really work together to group students. So we like to celebrate. We don't wait till the end of the year, but we certainly make sure that we celebrate. We have one specific data talk at the end of the school year where we celebrate all of our growth. So I think that's pretty much it. What questions do you have?
Is SIT Student Intervention Team? That's a wild guess. Awesome, great.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. Yes. Okay.
Good evening. I'm here to talk to you about how we have data talks over at the middle school. Every about 6 to 8 weeks, we have quarterly FastBridge score and local assessment data talks just to assess whether we should move students into intensive math or reading programs or maybe exit them out of that. This analysis also helps us to identify whether a student might require additional interventions, a possible GEI, adjustments to their schedule, or possibly a SPED evaluation. We also examine data at the end of each semester to decide whether a student should enter or exit advanced math. We have that new updated criteria that we use this year to do that. Our PLCs work on Wednesday mornings. Bi-weekly they meet. So we have our content team meetings and we have our color team meetings. Every 2 weeks they'll meet and they maintain communication with admin if they have any concerns with students that they might see during those times. That's also another time that they might look to identify Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 students. Yeah. Okay. The entire staff also utilizes a data analysis tool. That's a new tool that we're using this year. It kind of streamlines the data and makes it more manageable for our teachers to examine data. Each color team has a spreadsheet that has a list of all their students in it, and that way they can look at FastBridge scores and state assessment scores to be able to just analyze and determine which students might need a little bit more support or maybe identify our gifted students that might need some enrichment. And we're really focusing this year on differentiation, and that's aligning with our school goals and our improvement plan. So that's one of our big focuses that we're moving toward.
As we were talking about differentiation, that's a big part of what we want to do in the future. Right now, with what we're doing for our data talks is every other week for a subject matter or as a team, color team, the opposite weeks. What we're looking to do in the future is possibly add more time throughout the day, utilizing classified staff, similar to what they do in the elementaries, to look at just literacy data, look at just math data, because sometimes when we meet every other week, we have behavior data that dips into things, and then sometimes it gets derailed. And when you only have an hour, 15 minutes get a derailment, just isn't enough time. So that's one of the things that we're really focusing on. And what Ms. Pearson didn't mention is this year at our January 3rd professional development, we looked at who are we going to target. We looked at names. We put names to numbers and said, okay, these are the kids that need our additional support. So we've really started working with staff on the differentiation piece. But time is something that we're all short on, and one of our goals as we turn into the next year, 24-25, is really looking at that differentiation piece and doing some more targeted data talks during the day, during the school day, rather than just at PLC time.
Thank you.
I was just going to say ditto because I think there's a lot of repeat here. But I think we all know that things have always looked different at the high school. And that's something that I wanted to maybe highlight a little bit with everybody was some of the differences that we might have. You know, when you look at the elementary world, there's a lot of ability to change things day to day with students. And you can move them into groups. You can take them out of groups. You could put them in another group, and it's just so fluid, which is really nice for them. At our level, it becomes a little bit more difficult to do some of that. And so a lot of our focus then becomes to those department PLCs, really the classroom itself. And what can we do within the classroom during the time we have instead of thinking along the lines of an intervention block or an extra class that a student might have to take. We do have some situations where students do have intervention classes that they're put into, so there is some double blocking that takes place. We've added an algebra lab the last 2 years now to try and help with some of that some of those early algebra skills that need to be learned. But really, a lot of our data discussion focuses with our instructional coaches and myself, working primarily with our math and our English teachers, digging into some of those common assessments that they might have. And then specifically, if you look at FastBridge data or state assessment data, unfortunately for us, state assessment data only happens in their 10th grade year for reading and math. And so, you know, we try to use FastBridge data with our freshmen. And then sophomores, we try to look at that state assessment data. Our juniors do have some science data. Social studies data is a little bit different now than what it used to be, so we're still learning some of that. But then we look at that ACT as well. Luckily, we have, I think this year we're going to have 220 kids take the ACT, which is a pretty good dipstick for us to kind of see where our students are at come their junior year. So those are some of the pieces of data we use. But what we really try to do is after our common assessment times, and I shouldn't say common assessment and confuse you with that, but we take FastBridge assessments, you know, during the fall. We do FastBridge assessment during the winter, and then we do FastBridge assessment during the spring. And we try to analyze those after every window. We have meetings this month set up with our English department here in a couple weeks, and then our math department following that once the window closes next week. We do a lot with credit checks. A lot of our data does fall back to credits. What classes are students passing? What classes are students not passing? And of course, we've talked about F data before, and I think we've made a lot of gains in that area over the last couple of years. One thing that I'm really proud of, I think, is we know that our high school students get to a point where it's really easy not to come to school, and so one thing we do weekly, one type of data that we look at is attendance and try to analyze which students are having tardies, which students are unexcused, which students, you know, are they missing a certain block, or, you know, where are they at, trying to track them. But our attendance data is a real big piece of data that we try to do or try to look at to make sure our students are staying engaged and staying on track. We do, as a counselor principal group, we meet a couple times a month to review discipline data. Of course, there's some confidentiality there, but we try to work really closely with our counselors on, you know, what interventions are we trying to do as principals, what interventions are they trying to do as counselors to try and make sure that, you know, we're all moving down that same direction, that same road. I would say that our math teachers are usually really good at looking at data, especially when it comes to the numbers, and our English teachers are terrific as well. We continue to try to coach them and help them understand that the FastBridge data, you know, it doesn't necessarily analyze high school skills for everything. And so we try not to get stuck in a rut that just because it maybe is an assessment looking at some of those lower level skills, that doesn't mean that it can't help us become better and help us in our classrooms. And so we try to utilize assessments and help them as much as we can, learning to, you know, what new resources are out there for us to use and those types of things. We have become better at using common assessments with our new math resource, our English resource. I should have wrote it down, but it also has an assessment piece to it that's directly tied to our Kansas standards, which has been nice. And so we've been experimenting with that this year, and I think we'll have some good movement with it next year. Then every year, we use our end of the year assessment to try and help with our school improvement plans. And our school improvement plan every year, we roll that out in August after working with department chairs over the summertime to try and reevaluate goals, create new goals if we need to. And then we always train every teacher, no matter if you're a PE teacher, no matter if you're a FACS teacher, doesn't matter who you are, we try to train them every year on how to get into the data system. And specifically with our school improvement is to understand Lexile scores, and how do I incorporate reading into my classroom? How do I make sure it's not always a college level text, or maybe it's not always that junior high level text? And so we've done a lot of work with that over the last few years. Okay.
Thank you.
Questions for Brandy?
This was all really interesting. I do have a question for Dathan, for anyone. You all had mentioned at some point our new resources in math and language arts, and I was wondering, like, what role does that make this sort of data discussion easier because you have a consistent tool that's being used from, preschool all the way up to high school? So just wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
I'm going to just do a real brief. I think we're still learning some of those pieces. I can tell you for the English language arts resource, we're still working out the pacing, and so we're having to adjust some of those assessments. That is the nice thing about the resource with HMH, the company that we purchased from, is it allows the teachers to adjust the assessments if we need to. So we're still working on all of that. I believe it will. I believe the nice thing about that, we just had a lead teacher meeting this morning, and what we discovered is for second grade, and some of them are doing their own individual tweaks to the assessments. So there was some discussion about, well, as a second grade across the district, we need to have the same assessment because that's that continuity piece. So I can speak a little bit to that because I still think we're in those beginning stages. And I know at the elementary level, they did some adaptations for math last year. I think middle and high school are still working through that too. Both resources have a lot to them, so a lot of learning, and our teachers have really worked hard to make that happen.
Thank you. I have no doubt that is going to just make us stronger every single year. So thank you.
I have a question about attendance. What do you all think is the biggest challenge you are having with getting students to come to school right now?
I'd say it's probably the roads are a little slick and icy, right? No. Our biggest deal right now is tardies, and it was actually something we were supposed to look at yesterday with department chairs at our department chair meeting, but I think I had Ryan run a report for me last week on tardies, and that's kind of the biggest one I want to tackle right now. I would say our overall attendance rate's pretty good. We have students that have many unexcused absences, and a lot of that goes back to they're at that age where it's pretty easy to dig your heels in, and there's a lot of parents that just can't grab you and drag you into the building, right? But most of our kids come to school, but it's a matter of, do we get there on time? And if I'm missing 15 minutes of instruction every day over the course of a year, we know what that adds up to. Or it's a matter of the building's large enough and there's enough doors and enough hiding spots, I guess you could say, that it's easy not to go to class. Or, I went to block 1, but I don't like block 3, so I'm going to go find me somewhere else to hang out possibly. We had over 7,000 unexcused blocks for tardies semester 1, and we had over 2,000 excused tardies, which means parents have to call in. And so it's very easy not to show up on time, and it's very easy not to show up to class when you're supposed to. And so that's the biggest one we're trying to tackle right now. So that's something that this semester we're going to work through with our department chairs. I don't know if I'll bring a new policy to you or a new procedure, come May or June when we look at handbooks, but that's kind of the direction that I'm trying to get some feedback from teachers on, because it frustrates them. And so what could we do? What could we look at doing differently to maybe help and make sure students are in class? Yeah.
I had a question. I noticed a couple of the early slides talked about formative assessments, and I kind of wanted to hear more about that a little bit as far as, does the new curriculum give you some of that, or is that more just the teacher creates that and kind of, I almost feel like sometimes we focus too much on the testing aspect at the end, and we don't do enough to go back and really look at the results and then try to do some remediation. But I like the fact that you mentioned that several times. So.
Yes, I'll speak at the elementary level, and kind of like Judy had mentioned, I think our lead teachers teachers are doing an amazing job of when they get together, they're having those conversations. But our new curriculums do offer some of those assessments. And I think that teachers are right now kind of dipping into and learning what works and what doesn't. And the nice thing for us, I know when we come to data talks, is really having those conversations together. And if we can determine at a grade level, this is what works, at our building, then we can take that back to those lead teacher meetings. And so hopefully over time, we can build those common assessments. But I know for us, at least, the great thing right now is we all have one resource. They're not looking around, they're not trying to build their own assessments. They at least have something to start with. So that's been really great for us at the elementary level. So.
Well, to add also, so Judy, could you talk a little bit about how data discussions are used with SIT, so the student intervention teams, and how that all works?
So when they've had their data discussion, you always have a few students that may pop up. Their data is not, they're not performing like they need to. They're not making growth like they need to. And that rolls into the SIT meetings, the student improvement team meetings. And so that's where you're going to see not just that summative data, but you'll also see that formative or the diagnostic test. For example, if I'm a student that's struggling with phonetics, you're going to have the phonics assessment, and we can identify what skills their deficits are. And so this student improvement team focuses on that data. They compare to other students at that grade level. Where should I be? Where am I not being? They talk about what other interventions do I need to do. If this isn't working, we're not moving fast enough, so we're going to change the intervention for the student. Typically, by the time you get to a SIT meeting, we're talking about students that are working at a tier 3 level. And so then we revamp and we do some more intervention, and then we come back and we revisit and we see if any gains were being made, or you make a decision, it's time for an evaluation for special education. But that all of that data is talked about during those meetings.
Thank you. And I just had one more comment, and I was really happy to hear about the data analysis tool that you all have at the middle school. And I think providing that to teachers so they can just have one place to see how their students are doing is really important. So I'm excited to hear about that.
Well, I'd like to say that I came up with it by myself and, in a dream or something. But Morgan and I had a conversation at the start of this year about making things more manageable. With all the data pieces that we have, is being able to collect it into one space. So I'll kind of let Morgan talk how she did that.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to go to one of the elementary schools and watch one of their data talks, and I was like, man, this is really cool. This is something that I feel like would really benefit the middle school. And so one of the instructional coaches shared their tool with me and John, and we kind of went through that and revamped it a little bit to benefit our teachers at the middle school and the things we do there. But yeah, I think people were, when they saw it on the 3rd for the first time, I think the teachers were really excited about it, and I think it definitely is something that, at least when I was a teacher, I know that it's a lot easier just to do one click and look at all that data instead of clicking around to find it. So I do think it's going to be a really nice tool for us to use, and I told the teachers it's flexible, so if there's something we need to add to it or whatever, your teams can do that, or I can do that, or however we want to do it. But yeah, I think it's been really good so far. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Any other questions, comments? Great. Well, thanks. This is a great informative presentation. Thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Martin, for celebrating your birthday with us.
And I just want to do a personal thank you to all of them for coming and doing this, and really giving great descriptions of what they do for data discussion. Really appreciate them coming in and sharing with all of you. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, next up on the agenda is item 8A, board reports. And we have the Emporia Recreation Commission.
Hey, so I'm going to be kind of a broken record here. We are still working on the MOU between the city and interested parties for the formation of a steering committee for a new rec center. But I did want to let everyone know that on Tuesday, January 16th at 11:30 a.m. at the rec center, there is going to be a ribbon cutting ceremony for the new rec center indoor golf room. I think I had told you all about that previously. So you'll be able to see the golf simulator, take a few swings at it in a safe environment in which there are no windows to break. And so hopefully everyone can learn more about that and put it to use.
Thank you. And Leslie, do you have something from the Flint Hills Technical College Board?
Yes, we did have our regular monthly meeting on Monday. We ended up having it via Zoom because of the weather, just in case. It was a very run-of-the-mill standard meeting with nothing terribly exciting to report. but we did have our meeting.
Those are always the best board meetings. Great, thank you. Next item is item 8B, Resolution 2024-1, establishing regular Board of Education meeting time and place for 2024. And every year, we're asked to approve, to establish our regular meeting dates and times. And within the document, you can see we have our proposed meeting dates with a couple of tweaks to the calendar. And we will be switching our meeting time from 6:30 PM to 6 PM. And this is all up for discussion as well. Dr. Harder, did you have something to add?
I just want, so originally, as we're looking ahead, we were looking at February the 14th, but we were going to bump that up. The March meeting fell on spring break, so we were moving that for families to have a break. I think those were the only two changes to what we would have regularly scheduled.
And we also just have one board meeting in May, just because there's so many other obligations that month for administrators and school board members.
I think the only reason we moved it from 7 to 6:30 and we considered 6, but that was, I think you were working out of town at the time, Jeremy, and it was hard for you to remember. We didn't think you could always be here at 6, maybe, or maybe.
Yeah, I think that was because I feel like that was when I was doing a municipal court
think
docket
so,
in
too.
Burlington.
Yeah.
But that's not really an issue for me
Okay.
now because I
And
could
you
arrange to
drove
work from
further.
home Wednesday or leave early.
You had a further drive, and I feel like Grant wasn't in love with that either, but who knows?
I think Casey, did you follow up with, did you make contact with Grant?
I did. Grant said it would not be his top preference, but he could make it work. So it was up to you guys.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
I mean, I don't feel particularly strong either way. Whatever everyone else wants to do. I don't know.
I think it's nice for employees to be able to go home a little bit sooner in the evening. So
I
I'm
agree.
not opposed to it.
I agree. Also the press. So this is an action item. So if we would like to move to 6 PM with these dates, we would take that motion, or we could have a revised motion. What are the wishes of the board?
I will move to approve Resolution 2024-1, establishing regular Board of Education meeting time and place for 24 is submitted to include the change to 6 PM for meetings.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
The next item is item 8C, Resolution 2024-2, to extend the term of board officers. Dr. Harder, did you have anything to report on this?
So, as you can see, I'll just read that. As for approve a resolution establishing regular meetings, I'm on the wrong one. Extending the term of current board officers, through July 2024. This is something we do every year. So rather than in January, we do this in July. It would start in July. So currently we have Board President Jamie Reaver and current Board Vice President Lillian Lingenfelter, and successors for such positions are elected by the board in the next calendar year. So that is what this resolution addresses.
Great, thank you.
I need no discussion. Your leaders are both doing a wonderful job.
Oh, thank you.
So you want me to motion? Everybody go with me motion? Okay. I move to approve Resolution 2024-2 to extend the term of board officers as submitted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 8D, board representation to committees and boards for 2024. As you all know, we are really lucky in our service to the Board of Education to also get to serve in other boards and organizations throughout the community. including the Joint Economic Development Advisory Committee, the Interest-Based Bargaining Group, Kansas Association of School Board Delegate, the Insurance Committee, the Build for the Future, the Wellness Committee, the Insurance Committee, and Board Policy. And every year, we can re-up our membership on those, or others can say if they would like to serve on those committees. And do we need to go through these one by one, Casey?
If we could just go down the document in order, that would be great.
Okay. So on the attached document, the Flint Hills Technical College Board of Trustees, Leslie Silly would continue in that role. Jeremy Dorsey, Ryan Cargillet would continue on the Employee Recreation Commission Board. Isn't Pam also?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And look, the attached document doesn't have her name, so we'll just have to correct that. Okay. On the Joint Economic Development Advisory Council, Grant Riles will continue for this year. On interest-based bargaining, Leslie Silly will continue as the representative. We do need an alternate for that.
You learn a lot.
You do. Well, I'll volunteer. I will continue, yes.
Now, if you, I mean, I know we weren't allowed to talk about this, but if you really, really want it, I bet you're already serving on so many other
Yes,
committees.
I'm happy for you to
Okay,
stay.
all right,
So
okay,
I will,
okay.
I will continue as alternate.
Just don't want to,
So
not give you the chance if you want
it
it.
would be a lot more fun board meeting if we actually had to have a thumb war or
Right,
something to choose.
Rock, paper, scissors, yeah.
So, the next item is the KASB Convention Delegate. Lillian will serve as the representative. Casey, do we need to get an alternate for this? Or can that be decided closer to the convention when we know who's attending?
All of the attendees are the alternates.
Oh, great, okay, great. I should read the fine print. Okay. And then the Board Policy Review Committee, Lillian will continue on that, in that role.
Unless someone else. Art, did you?
No, I was going to let you do that.
Okay, your name was also underneath that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Casey, do you see that from last year? On 6.
On the Wellness Committee, Jen will continue to serve. On the Insurance Committee, Jeremy and Art and Leslie. Are you also in the Insurance Committee?
Yeah, I don't think I'm on it.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
I'll let you continue.
You're doing a great job. Yeah. And then Art and I will continue to serve on the Build for the Future Committee, because this actually could be like the last year of it, getting to the end of the bond. Okay. Is there anything that we're missing that we can think of? Okay. This is an action item, so we will need a motion to approve the
I
slate.
move to approve the annual appointments as submitted.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Item 9A, proposal to reorganize the Flint Hills Special Education Cooperative Administrative Structure. Dr. Harder?
Yes, we have Mrs. Tara Glades, Director of Student Services, to provide some information. This has actually been a conversation that has happened with the Flint Hills Special Education Cooperative Board of Directors, which are all the superintendents from the member districts, myself, Tara Glades, and Pam Stranathan. We've been talking about this for some time, so how do we become more efficient, more effective? And so Mrs. Glades has a proposal and have the support of the Board of Directors, so that's very helpful.
Right, thank you. Thank you for adding all that. You just took away a lot of what I was going to say, but I'm happy to answer any questions here. So Dr. Harder is right. This idea of reorganizing the cooperative administrative structure has been discussed for several years. It's really gained traction here as we, as a board of directors, have been looking at our articles of agreement. We've been looking at that document very closely and planning to make some edits to that. We're really narrowing down how we want to make those edits. That's a long process that involves the local government and Kansas Board of Education. So anyway, it's a long process, but through that, it's really challenged us to take a much deeper look at our staffing for the cooperative. So there's really 3 reasons. And Casey, if you want to click on the proposal. Yeah, there you go. So I had included this as one of our uploads here for this item. So 3 main reasons that we would look at doing something such as this, the restructuring of that admin structure. Efficiency. I mean, we want to always be looking at our human resources and making sure that we are supporting our special education teachers and our member district administrators in the most efficient and effective way possible, and building their capacity so that they can feel comfortable supporting and facilitating those special education services out in their member districts. The second reason would be in an effort to align our cooperative structure and make it similar to some of the other co-ops and interlocals within the state of Kansas. And you see there's a chart there that's actually partially on this first page here and also on the second page. And I just kind of looked for several that could give us an idea of what other administrative structures look like for co-ops. Our range is there from 3 districts to as many as 12 districts. So as you can see, we do our structure looks a little bit differently with a director and 6 coordinators. So we would like to try and align, not only become more efficient, but align with that structure of other cooperatives. And then the last part of that proposal would be to add an assistant director position. When we compare salaries, it actually could be an anticipated cost savings when we're just looking at salaries. So decreasing those coordinator positions by attrition, and then adding that assistant director, we could enjoy a little bit of an anticipated salary decrease there, which would translate to a savings on cooperative member district assessments, which we're always talking about our assessments. When Dr. Cardula is up here, assessments mean a very different thing. When we're here talking through the cooperative lens, it means those payments that they make to the sponsoring district to push the services and of the cooperative and the work of the cooperative forward. So what questions might you have as you reviewed that proposal about anything that I mentioned tonight, anything that needs clarification at all?
What questions do we have?
I don't really have any. I mean, you all know far more about this than me. The superintendents all agree. It sounds like you've been working on it for a long time, so I really don't have any questions. But thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, that's pretty important to me too, is that you have the superintendent buy-in from all of the other district members. And so that makes me feel very comfortable that we're not somehow reducing quality. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that it's just really nice that you could all come together and create the structure that makes the most sense for the co-op. And so, I mean, I want to support that because like Leslie said, you all know far better than we do, so.
Thank you.
This is an action item.
I move to approve the proposal to reorganize the Flint Hills Special Education Cooperative Administrative Structure for the 2024-2025 school year, including the addition of an Assistant Director of Student Services position.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. And item 9B, policy DJ FAB, administrative leeway on the water leak at Emporia High School. Dr. Harder?
Yes, so this isn't something that we want to bring back again, but unfortunately during a scheduled repair at the high school for a water pipe, which was ours. It had nothing to do with the city, so we wanted to qualify that. As they were trying to patch that, then the leak became worse. And so there was really nothing we could do other than it needed to be replaced so we could get staff and students back into the building. And we had a lot of communication because I wanted to keep the board in the loop of all of that. And so especially as we're digging into the parking lot in the back out by the food service, so you all know what's going on. Mrs. Stranovan, do you have anything else to add? I know. Thanks, Pam.
I do know when Corey had called me at that point, there were we had to make a decision because the hole was opened, and they were there, the plumbing, everybody was waiting on something to do, and at the point that was day 3 that they were into that, it was going to go over if they kept proceeding to move on from there. So don't have all the bills in yet, projecting that it's going to be just a little bit under 50,000.
Thank you, and I really do appreciate the communication that you had with us, Dr. Harder, during the break, so we were all informed of every step of the way of what was happening.
Thank you.
And also to the team and to Corey, because, I mean, winter break is great, but school buildings don't often rest like we do. So I know there's a lot of extra work on their break, too.
And they've done a great job, especially, this is the second time we've had to move forward with this, so thank you all.
I saw Corey's request in the email to check out the spot if people were out and about, so I took that like for us too. And so because we live over by the high school, we did drive over there just to make sure that there was no water in the hole. And it was the normal amount of water.
Not gushing out, which we were told. This is an action item.
I move to approve the superintendent's use of board policy DJFAB, administrative leeway for emergency plumbing repair at Emporia High School by the Director of Maintenance and Grounds as submitted.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. And pulling out our calendars, we have a regular board schedule we don't have a regular board schedule. We made some changes. So on Wednesday, January 24th, we have a meeting at 6 p.m. On Wednesday, February 7th, we will also meet at 6 p.m. And on Wednesday, March 27th, we will meet at 6 p.m.
I didn't know how to put it in there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I missed February 20th.
Casey, will you send us text messages like every Wednesday at 5:45 so we remember to come?
I sure can. And I did miss the second February meeting on there, so I'll get that added.
Great, thank you. And then we're on item 11A, a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.